Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Our Time to Thrive podcast. I'm Dr. Krista, your host, navigating you through tips and tricks, all things holistic health. So today we have a special guest who's going to talk to us a lot about the importance of relationships and their impacts on our health in general, our well-being. So we have April ECKHARDT, and she is a therapist. She's a couples therapist. She's a, singles therapist, but she's also a mom, which makes her really well informed. And, she's dealt with her own relationships in her life, obviously. But she also has a new practice that she's opening up called Positive Blooms Therapy Services. So you'll be able to check her out. We'll talk more about that at the end, but she's someone who's been doing therapy for a long time. She's also trained in EFT, CBT. She does EMDR as well. So lots of good stuff to talk about. So welcome, April. So excited to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here, and I love Our Time to Thrive. I think it's a great way to help everyone be healthy and in a natural type of way. So thank you for having me.
Exactly. Yeah, we're excited. So let's dive in. Why don't you just start telling us a little bit about yourself, your own story? What got you into therapy in general?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I think helping people has always been in my blood. Even when I was young, like I would always have this ability to chat. I like to talk, and I also like to help people even when I was young. I actually went to college while I was in high school, and I actually heard a speaker he happened to be a psychologist, came into our health class, and I was just enamored by him. And the first thing I thought was, oh my gosh, I can like talk to people and help people and actually get paid for it. And that just kind of started the whole thing. I was 19, went to college, and but I was, life happens. I'm sure everybody can relate to that. And I ended up going a different route. But I did go back and get my master's in later life, and I'm so grateful. It's my purpose. I love helping people, especially when it comes to relationships, families, even now, individually. There's so much going on in the world, and so people just really need someone to talk to.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. What do you feel like are the things that are kind of influencing us societally that affects us in our relationships and our mental health with everything that's going on?
Oh my gosh. I think the number one thing is actually stress. And I know it sounds like such a simple thing, but when we have stress and we're at a constant level of stress, like if you think about right now, and I don't want to get too much into politics because everybody has their own views and that's totally okay. But you look at our economy, right? A lot of people are struggling to pay bills. A lot of people are struggling to, put food on the table and those kind of things. And of course, your stress is going to go up. What happens is then if you have long term stress, your cortisol levels are going to shoot through the roof. And so when that happens, right, we have such a physical reaction. I mean, as a doctor, I'm sure you completely understand. And it then has an effect on our relationships. If we're tired, if we're stressed, if we're cranky, if we don't feel good about ourselves, right? High cortisol levels can lend to weight gain, not being able to sleep, right? All of these things, which then in turn are going to affect who we communicate with. And it's not just relationships. Like if you're thinking like intimate relationships, it's friendships, it's family, it's people you see at the gas station. Like you can have a completely different attitude. So it's a big deal.
Totally. Yeah, I can relate as you know, just even things like not getting sleep, whether you're stressed from work stuff or maybe you have a tiny baby who keeps you up, that's going to
Yeah,
change your whole mental emotional space during the day, and that can negatively or positively, depending on it, affect relationships. So
absolutely.
let's talk about some ways that relationships can benefit our health. How are good
Yes.
relationships helpful for us?
It's so funny that you say that because I had the wonderful opportunity and the experience in my early years of therapy to have met a woman that I kind of geeked out because she was like a celebrity to me. Her name is Dr. Sue Johnson, and she's actually the co-founder of EFT, right? So emotionally focused therapy. And she actually, in a positive way, this is really a big deal. And I know emotions are hard for a lot of people, but if you have this emotional bond, right, and you feel vulnerable, which is another word that a lot of people shiver at. But if you're vulnerable, you can actually it can actually help and lift the good vibes in your brain, right? The good feelings that happen. One of the things I'll never forget is she actually talked about something that they had done, kind of not an experiment. I hate to use that with people, but they did some research and they found out that if they had a woman who got a slight shock, right? And she didn't have her partner there. Oh my gosh, all these lights went off in her brain. All these things went off like danger, I'm in threat. And the pain she felt was astronomical. They then brought in her partner who they had done a lot of EFT work. They felt securely attached and he held her hand. They did it again. She didn't even feel it. So the brain actually sees it as it doesn't see it as a threat any longer because you're connected with that person. So when you're connected with that person, right, you have these feelings of, I can get through anything. I have this person that I can count on. Now, don't mistake that for a perfect relationship. I know a lot of people that are like, well, if it's a perfect relationship, we shouldn't have trouble or problems. That's not true. Not true at all. In fact, healthy relationships argue. Healthy relationships have some conflict, but it's being able to get through that conflict together in a positive way. I hope that answered the question.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, I think with all things, it's important to have some amount of healthy stress, right? Eustress is what we call that because that's how you grow. So even things like in the health world, catching a cold, that's actually very helpful for your body to have the immune system grow. If you never catch a cold, that actually doesn't mean that that's a sign of health.
Right.
So I think in the same way with your relationships, it is important to have discussions and arguments here and there because you're learning about each other and you're growing from that.
Yes. Learning how to communicate.
Yes, which we're going to dive into too. But before we do that, I just want to jump back to this piece you said about vulnerability, because like you said, a lot of people struggle with that. Why do you think we all struggle with vulnerability? And do you have any tips or tricks for how to work on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think vulnerability, when you think about that word, you literally have no defenses, right? You're just being extremely open and transparent. But when we're open and transparent, what happens is that leaves room for hurt, that leaves room for um, the soft parts of you, so to speak. And people don't want that to be used against them. That's a big one, used in a fight, right? Those kind of things. You're left just open. Um, I often talk to my couples about when it comes to intimacy and sex, like you're at their most vulnerable at that time. And that's where a lot of people struggle. And that's okay. And, that's a whole other topic that we could get into. But as far as emotions go, those softer emotions like hurt and sad and feeling alone, right? Those are really soft emotions. And so people don't want that to be used against them. There's also fear of abandonment, right? If I say these things and I'm going to open myself up and be vulnerable, well, they could reject me, they could leave. Um, and sometimes people that fear vulnerability is because they've done it in the past and it hasn't worked out for them. So I think with vulnerability, you have to have a level of trust. If you don't have a level of trust with the person that you're attempting to be vulnerable with, it's not going to happen. You have to be able to trust the person that you're going to be vulnerable with. And trust really should be a foundation of your relationship. Because if you don't have trust, right, that's bad. Then you're always going to be questioning. There goes those cortisol levels. And then you're going to be arguing. and it becomes a snowball effect. So the first thing is trust. And the other thing is don't rush it. I've seen a lot of single women and men too, believe it or not. I've had an increase of men that are starting to come to therapy, and I couldn't be happier. Men really get the raw end of the deal when it comes to therapy, this male toxic, like I have to be a man or beat my chest type of thing. And so it's nice to see men coming in because they have their own set of mental health issues. But both men and women have come to me and they seem to want to just jump right into a relationship because they're lonely and they miss that. It's this level of comfort, right? But that's the problem. If you don't know someone, take your time, learn about them, learn how to develop trust. I always say it's earned, it's not given. So really get to know this person, really get to dive into who they are. And as you're starting to learn, you start to trust, you start to open up, you start to see how they argue, you start to see how they communicate. And sometimes I have young couples that come in, and when I say young, I don't mean 20s, 30s, I mean young in the relationship, right? That will come and say, oh, we're just not communicating. And I applaud them because they're in the beginning and they really want it to work. So there's a lot of things that incorporate that vulnerability, but you really just got to trust that person. You really do.
Yeah, trust is huge. And I think a lot of us have had many experiences that make us not have trust for the world, for people, for whomever it may be. But I also think society just kind of trains us to not be vulnerable as well. Like if you think about social media, only things people post are the good things, looking good or celebrations. They're not posting anything vulnerable generally. Same with like becoming a doctor, for example. We were never taught to be vulnerable. It was always, you have to be very professional. There's boundaries between your relationship with your patients, yada, yada, yada. But over time, I've actually learned that if you're vulnerable with your patients, like you tell them what you've gone through, your struggles, that makes them trust you because they know you're a human being and you've been through similar things, which we all have. We all have obstacles, but it's that vulnerability that creates the trust as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that has been a big deal in therapy as well in our industry. Same thing. Don't get attached. You're there to help them. It's not about you. But then when people can relate, they feel a lot less guarded.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Very
pretty cool.
interesting how that works.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty good.
Okay, so let's dive into the communication realm because you brought that up a couple times.
Yes.
For people who feel like they're in a space where they're struggling with communication with their partner or family or whoever it may be, do you have some advice for them, things they could start to work on with that person or on their own?
Absolutely. 100%. I think, first of all, is when you are communicating with your partner, I think it's really easy for us to go, "Oh, they just don't get it." Right? Like I'm trying to tell them something, they don't get it, or they're not listening, or it's always, "Oh, that person's defensive, or this person's shutting down." Right? It's because you've reached a level of conflict where you both are just seeing red, and then at that point, it's not helpful. It's just not. That's when you both should say, "Okay, you know what? We're not getting anywhere. We need to do this later. We need to come to a point where when we're not so angry, right?" But initially, when you communicate with someone, try to remember that their perspective is their reality. Again, like their perspective is their reality. And it's not that they're in another world or they're delusional. That's not what I'm saying. But when you think about, when you're communicating with someone, in your mind, you're saying something intentional and you're saying this, right? Like, a husband might say, I really like that dress better than the other dress. We use that as an example. And in the wife's mind, she's going, oh, so I look fat in the other dress? Is that what you're saying? Right. And that's her reality. She really heard him say, I like this dress because the other dress made you look fat. right? And in reality, like if you were a bystander, you'd be like, wait, what just happened? Like, I don't understand. They're both right because it's in their brain and that's how they perceived what they were being told. It's all in the delivery. So part of it is remember that your partner is not you. Basically. And it's okay. I've told clients many times, especially in the beginning of communicating, ask clarifying questions before you assume, because we all do it. Don't say, "Oh, I don't do that." Yes, you do. We all do. It's just how we're made. Is to say to the person, "Okay, I'm a little upset right now. Let them know I'm a little upset, but I want to find out. This is what I heard you say. I heard you say the other dress made me look fat." Give your partner that availability or that option to go, "Wait, what?" And I guarantee he would say, "Absolutely not. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry that I didn't mean to make you feel that way. No, like this is what I like the other dress because it's polka dots. And I personally like polka dots." Right. And so then it completely diffuses what could be an absolutely horrendous argument. But I think what happens is we know what we think. And so obviously they think the same. And that's just not true.
Yeah, I think especially as we get further into relationships and we feel like we really know that other
Mm.
person, then it's
That
harder.
can
It's almost like you make more
yeah.
assumptions then.
Yes, because you know somebody for so long and you know their behaviors, you know their nonverbals, you know what they're saying. That's so true. Oh my gosh. Yes. Very, very true, Krista. And I think part of it is still reminding yourself that, like, as you're in a long term relationship, you both are growing and changing. You're evolving. You are not the same person. If you're married to someone or dating someone long term, let's say even 5 years, it's a long time to be with someone. You're dating them or what have you. And one person says, "Hey, what do you want for your birthday?" And the other person's like, "You should know be good enough by now. I'm not telling you." Right? I've heard that before. And it's like, okay, but that's not fair because maybe they really liked something when they first met, but they evolved and grew and like something different. It happens. We change. We're never going to be the same. So it is okay to ask a partner of 5 years, 10 years, even 20 years. I have a couple who have been married over 30 years and they still make the wrong assumptions. So it happens, which is human.
Yeah, yeah. So taking a step away, you mentioned
Yeah,
realizing you don't think the same way as your partner, not making assumptions, asking clarifying questions. Those are all great
absolutely.
tips. So let's say for whatever reason, those things don't happen. Someone
Yes.
ends up in a conflict.
Yes. The dreaded conflict.
The conflict, what are some ideas for conflict resolution, how to navigate that in a more quote unquote easeful way? Any ideas there?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, I always tell people if you're getting into a lot of conflict, like if it's just more tumultuous is kind of a heavy word, but if it's just like you feel like you're fighting all the time, of course I'm going to tell you to go to therapy because at some point you're not going to be able to resolve it on your own, and having someone go, "Okay, hang on a second. What are we really fighting about?" I've talked again to a lot of, and I'm sure you've heard me say this before, Krista, is it's not about the dishes, right? People will argue about, "Oh, I just put the dishes in the dishwasher and here he comes, puts it in I'm so upset." And it's like, really? You're upset about a dirty dish? It's not, right? And it gets to the point where it gets so difficult to understand like what really is the issue. So at that point, if you're fighting constantly, stop it. Just stop it and get help. There's nothing wrong with having a therapist jump in and kind of give you better tools. But if it's prior to that and you guys are still in a conflict, the best thing is to take a breather. And I know a lot of people are probably going, ugh, I don't like that. There are a lot of people out there that like to, oh, hey, we have a problem. Let's fix it right now. Let's dive in and like take care of it. But the truth of the matter is their counterpart might not be that way. Their counterpart might say, I can't do this anymore. It's overwhelming. And they literally shut down. So the best thing to do is to take a breather. And when I say that, I don't mean you break up for 6 months. That's not what I'm saying. Don't do that. But what I am saying is, okay, you know what? We need some space in between us. I'm going to go in the bedroom and I'm really going to think about why I'm so angry. The other partner can, go into the living room or the kitchen. And again, think about what's going on. Don't just go and binge watch a show or start playing video games. Like, that's not going to help, right? Come back to it. Come back to it. Now, usually I tell people take a timeout, kind of like, the parents out there who have toddlers and they put them in a timeout because they're not being nice, right? It's kind of the same thing. We need a timeout to really stop, take a deep breath, and then come back. Never use or blame in these situations. Don't say, you do this and you always say this, blah, 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 right? When you say you're making them the one, it's all your fault. This is because of you. One, it takes two to tango. So, we're not doing that because you are a big part of this fight as well. So don't do that. The other thing is to say words like right? Like, I feel hurt by what you just said. By indicating a feeling, again, Dr. Sue Johnson with EFT, that emotional feeling. Your partner can't argue with your emotion. They just can't, because it's how you feel. And so that also brings in the softer side. Again, we're talking vulnerability. So you see where a therapist could come in here and help. But that vulnerability piece, then that person can then respond and validate. Validation is really important. And so there's a lot to conflict. And so I think that's why I said, if you get to a point where you feel like my partner doesn't understand me anymore, we're always fighting, and this is very difficult, really do seek some outside help. But in the meantime, if you're just having these little arguments here and there, really sit and think, why am I so angry about this? What really is going on for me? Going back to the dishes analogy, right? Is it because you have put in all this effort and care to keep a nice clean spot, and by your partner coming and doing that, you feel disrespected? Maybe you feel dismissed. Maybe you don't feel like they see what you're doing as a part of your love language. So things like that. It's kind of complicated, but I hope I answered the question.
For sure. Yeah, the dishwasher example is reminding me of one of my own patients who, similarly, she had an issue with her husband because he would get water from like the fridge filter and ice. But he would always leave it on the ice. So when she would come to fill her glass with water, just ice would come out. And that would frustrate her so much because she does not like ice. She only wants the water. And this was like a huge point of tension for her. And I'm like, have you ever talked to him about this? And first of all, no, right? She's like holding that all in because she probably thinks, oh, I'm being ridiculous to some degree.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it came down to love languages, right? She wanted him to think of her and to think, you know what? My wife will really love if I set this up so that it's just water. Every time she comes, she doesn't have to think about it. It's just an act of service. And so once we were kind of able to sort that out, they were able to work on their relationship a little bit more and figure out that they have different ways of communicating their love. And that ultimately helped her whole health picture because, she was stressed and that was making her fatigued and brain fog and hormonal imbalances, all these things happening. And so I think that's the power of really having great communication and great relationships, is it impacts your health in a positive way.
Absolutely.
Do you have any examples or stories that you've seen relationships help people's health out to some degree? Their overall health?
Yes, exactly. I do. And in fact, I have an example of the other way as well.
Okay.
I I always tell this couple, I wish I could bottle what they have and I would be a millionaire, because I've worked with them for years. And again, it's the couple I referred to earlier. They've been married for over 30 years, and both their children are grown, very successful children. And, outwardly, it would appear they've had the perfect life, right? They're now, I say, semi-retired, because they're still very active. Um, but getting to know them, they came to me due to intimacy questions, and we just kind of grew from there. Now it does turn out the communication, right, was a big problem. And with them being older, right, being married this long, of course they're concerned about their health and their, just everything. When you get older, I'm starting to witness it myself. They start to slow down. And so, part of it was, when you get older, there are certain things with intimacy that will cause you to not be as sexual or as intimate, fatigue, all the things. Well, luckily, this couple is very health conscious. She works out every morning. He works out with his adult son. And they look amazing. I mean, you would never guess their age because they look incredible. But of course, there's still internal things that they had to go to the doctor for, hormones and things of that nature. That really impacted them prior to going to the doctor and going, okay, I admit I might need some help with my estrogen, or, my testosterone or vaginal dryness, or all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Because what would happen is then feelings of, oh, I'm not attractive anymore, or, oh, she doesn't want anything to do with me, or all he wants is this and I can't provide it and I feel bad. So depression, anxiety, right? That just, and again, distance. So that was a health concern. Obviously, it's a natural health concern that happens to all of us. Once they got that figured out, then they were like teenagers again. And she started to understand the power of just her own femininity, and started having fun with intimacy. Started to really be like, I wonder what'll happen if I do this. I wonder if it'll happen if I do that. This couple does amazing things with each other. They'll do strip poker. They'll, they'll go take little trips. They'll talk about, they even get games with cards and stuff. And it is so healthy. She flirts with him. He flirts with her. But when they have communication issues, they go back to what they learned in therapy because they still fight. And in fact, when I saw them last week, they said, we have recognized that even now when we fight, it's like a blip on a radar now, because we stop and we listen to our partner and we try to remember, she's not attacking me. He's not attacking me. This is how he's perceiving things, or how she's perceiving things. Their trust is skyrocketing, right? Like they trust each other. And she had a very good point. She said, we're not 20 anymore. We have friends who are dying, right? We see this. And she said, I see how important he is in my life. So why do I want to fight with him? And they both agreed that when they were younger, they almost got divorced because of the arguing and the difficulty in raising kids, and, life expenses and all these things. So they're a good example of, don't quit fighting, right? Keep working at it, keep trying. And they, again, were open to therapy, and they come now just for maintenance. But they are such a good example of even her saying, hey, I feel like he's being defensive, but she's also able to see her part in it, going, well, the tone I used wasn't okay, and I shouldn't have said this to him. So that's a big part of it. On the flip side, I also unfortunately see a lot of relationships that maybe don't work, but that's because they're not healthy relationships. Whether it's financial, emotional, or physical abuse. those are relationships that you can't fix, that you need to get out, right? And what happens with long-term trauma is there's actually a physical neurological event that takes place in your mind. And I actually did a lot of research on this at one point. And there's a lot of, if you look out there, there's a lot of different research that actually talks about what I'm about to talk about, but it affects your, I believe it's your hippocampus. It affects that. And so what happens is people will lose memory, right? It affects the emotional part of your brain. So when you're traumatized, you literally are in a fight or flight, right? You can't, you overgeneralize danger, basically. The woman that I was seeing, I still am seeing for a while, was so scared to leave because how am I going to live, right? We're talking financial abuse, we're talking emotional and physical. She knew she was in a bad spot, but she also knew that, like, I have no money. He's going to follow me. I have kids, right? So her level of stress, her level of anxiety was just over the top. And even though she knew the right thing to do, she couldn't do it because of fear of danger.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, I'm happy to report that she is out on her own now, and she had family support that helped her financially. Her kids are thriving. She's got a great job. And she literally is a different person. Her skin is brighter. She's smiling. She still has the stresses now of an ex, right? And the father of her children, but the control isn't there anymore. So for her, physically depressed, she would second guess herself. He would tell her she'd do something and she'd be like, well, maybe I did do that. And I'm like, you didn't do that. If you don't remember doing it, right? And now we're working on actually identifying emotion, because all she knew was anger and sadness. That's it. So you can tell individually and in a relationship, like, the person you're connected to is going to affect you regardless of what you do, if you have kids, if you don't have kids. So that's why it's so important to be able to communicate, right? And talk about emotions and be vulnerable. Always going back to the same things.
Yeah, those top concepts are really big for everyone. That's a really tough story to hear, and unfortunately it happens to a lot of people out there. So if anyone's listening right now and maybe in one of those circumstances, do you have any recommendations, things to just kind of help them in this moment?
Oh, absolutely. I think first of all, tell somebody, talk to somebody you trust, talk to somebody that isn't gonna run back and tell that spouse or partner what's going on. You can't do it alone. You just can't. There are also hotlines. Now, granted, I know the podcast can be done, worldwide, really. So you would have to check with your state. But definitely there's domestic abuse hotlines. Again, she saw me as at the very early stages. Get help for yourself. Go get therapy. I know therapy can be expensive, but there are health insurances, there are nonprofits that will help, because again, you can't do it alone. And I think part of it for her was the constant encouragement from me saying, wait a minute, no, you can. This is possible. It's not easy, but it is possible. And even now, she's now excited and says, I want to learn from you now. Like, I don't want to get into this type of relationship again. I want to learn how to be healthy. I want to learn how I can be me. So just don't do it alone. Get help so that, because you don't have to live that way. Nobody does. Nobody does.
Do you think it's common that people tend to get in the same circumstance kind of over and over again if they're not working on that? Why do you think that is that we do that?
It's extremely common. This is gonna sound kind of weird. So stick with me here. I'll connect the dots. But it can be, I'm a big believer in attachment theory. So basically, how you grow up doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to be like, but it gives you an imprint. It kind of gives you like a basic map of who you are. So if you had parents who were ushy cushy, lovey, I love you, very proud, chances are, to an extent, in a healthy way, you could have a secure attachment. However, if you had a parent who, or a caregiver of any kind, it could be a grandparent, it could be, whoever is raising you at that point. If you have someone who says that I'm here to take care of you and I love you, but then treats you badly, right? Yells at you all the time, or tells you that, oh God, you're so stupid. Why did you do that? Right. It creates this anxious, avoidant attachment, right? Because you want to love them. You're supposed to love them, but yet they're telling you these terrible things. And so you push away. Sometimes we go into the grown-up world, adulting, and that's what we carry with us. So that's part of it. Sometimes we just meet these people, right? And obviously I'm a woman. So like if I were to go out and meet a man who is just wonderful and, oh my gosh, you're everything and blah, 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 right? Love bombing is what is called, like just one after another. Well, who doesn't like to hear those things, right? And I say, okay, let's date. And then slowly he starts to say things to me that don't really feel good, but I love this person. So, oh, he really didn't mean it, or he was angry, I made him upset, right? If I'm anxious, avoidant, that's going to seem to be very common for me, right? Like I'm comfortable with that. And when I say comfortable, I don't mean, yay, it feels good, but I know how to handle that. I know how to deal with that. Mm-hmm. So even though it makes me feel sad, I know how to do it, right? But then if I get out of that relationship, and I've actually seen this happen with some clients, they get out of that relationship, whether it's emotional abuse, which emotional abuse is hard because a lot of people go, well, he didn't hit you, right? She didn't hit you, because it happens to men too. They think it's not abuse, and that's not true. That's false. But they leave the relationship, right? And they're like, oh, free, okay. Well, along comes Mr. Suave, right? Love bombs the crap out of you. Oh, I know this. This feels good. I know how to deal with this. Again, you fall back into the comfort. Mm-hmm. To be in a healthy relationship to someone who hasn't been or has been in a toxic relationship is more scary for people than it is to just fall back into, well, I know this and I know how to control this. Mm. Again, I have a client right now who's like, I want healthy, but I don't know what that looks like. And I push people away because I think, well, what if it's toxic, right? So of someone that says, hey, I want to take you out for dinner, right? Or I have another example. I have so many examples. I have my dear friend, in fact, I just saw her last night. She's like, you're going to do great at the podcast. She's a great gal. But she, horrible marriage. A quick synopsis. He is very abusive in all the ways, and he's an alcoholic. So she's gotten out, and I'm thankful for that. Very sweet woman. She's been through the process for a while. She just met somebody, and he's amazing. He will meet her for lunch just so he can see her. She goes grocery shopping. Hey, can I come with you just so we can spend time together? He validates her, but doesn't love bomb her. He encourages her, those kind of things. And every time he does something healthy, she goes, why is he doing this? I don't like this. Well, I can open my own door, right? Or I can carry my own groceries to the car. And I said, because he's showing you respect, right? He cares about you. So he's going to be kind. He's being chivalrous. But for her, it was it, and it still is. She's like, I just don't trust this. And I said, because it's healthy. You're not used to it. It's not comfortable for you. So that's why I said I will connect the dots. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing how we all get into these patterns and even things that are uncomfortable just because we're used to them, we continue
Yes.
doing. And I think it's the same in health and physiology, right? You eat those same foods even though they're bad for you, but it's a comfort to some degree, right? So it's all about breaking these habits and these patterns, I think, and learning new ways, which is why therapy is so helpful. Do you feel that talk therapy is always the best route for people having trouble in relationships, or are there other types of therapy that you think would be helpful?
I do think talk therapy is really good. I think there's different types of therapy, right? And it goes through different symptoms as well. As far as relational, yes, couples therapy is great. But I always tell, I'd like to tell, not always, but most frequently, try to tell couples who are having other side issues. If a woman is struggling with binge eating, for example, or depression, or maybe some trauma from her childhood. It, Really, that's kind of impeding on her own growth. And so I'll suggest, hey, why don't you try going to a group therapy? Why don't you try an individual therapist?
Mhm.
And sometimes I'm not a huge pusher for medication. I'm not. I want to make sure people feel comfortable in their own bodies. But sometimes if they've like, I have tried everything from meditation, which is a good one. I often tell people meditate, go to yoga. Yoga is so good for your body. Somatic yoga, another good one. But if they've tried everything else and are still just miserable, it could be a chemical imbalance. So again, everybody has their own feelings on that, and I'm not one to say yes, you must do drugs. I I'm not that person, but I will encourage them to check it out if they've said, I don't know what else to do.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, there's so many different types of therapy out there too, just looking at
Oh yeah.
EMDR, for example, right? That's a little bit different than having to talk. I just know some people have a lot of trouble talking, right, about
Yeah.
what's going on. So sometimes other types of therapy can be helpful as well.
It's interesting too, because they do have music therapy, they have art therapy, they have in what you're talking about, especially with little kids, they do play therapy. They don't sit and drill them questions, they color with them, or they'll play a game like Uno. For adults too, talking about the natural and healthy ways, I cannot suggest doing some kind of healthy activity. So important. Working out, going for a walk, stretching, like all of that really is incorporating your mind too. And I don't think everybody recognizes that. They're like, oh, I want to work out, and build my glutes or whatever. And it's like, that's great, right? Go build those glutes. But it's also helping the chemicals in your brain. People that work out or are continually active will typically be happier individuals because they're being active, if that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
you as a doctor probably agree with that.
Yes, you heard it from April, everyone. Everything is connected, right?
Everything's connected.
Lifestyle affects mental health and vice versa, right? Because your neurotransmitters, your endorphins, all of that can change based on what you're doing in your lifestyle. So super important that you get those habits in place, meditation and working out and eating right and healthy relationships.
Yes.
So
Yes.
one of the things I wanted to go back to that you mentioned was loneliness. Have you
Yes.
seen that have a big impact on people's health and their lives? And if someone's feeling lonely, do you have any suggestions for them?
Yes. One of the things that I really suggest is good. I think as human beings, we crave connection, and again, it doesn't have to be a romantic connection. It can be friendships. It can be maybe you have a sister or a brother that you're really close to. It could be some people go to church for community, some people go to other activities, art classes, those kind of things. Connection is really important. So, loneliness really can happen due to think about being with someone for a long period of time and then for whatever reason that stops, whether it's a breakup, a divorce, or even death, unfortunately. Um, And then you kind of notice that you're isolating yourself a little bit. And that's going to have a huge impact. You're going to start to feel a lot like alone, because there's a difference from being alone and lonely. But then you can start feeling bad about yourself. You start not wanting to do anything, and you can see some symptoms of depression, maybe anxiety. You start to say, why don't people like me, right? Self-doubt, like it just brings all this stuff. So again, kind of how we were talking about everything's connected. Again, reach out to someone, anybody that you do feel connected with, and do stuff. Like I challenge people all the time. Again, go past comfort, right? If you don't know how to kayak, well, dang it, go out and kayak. See what it's like, right? Even if you're by yourself, you start to recognize your own confidence. You start to become your own friend, right? And you start to realize that there are a lot of great things that you can do. And through doing those things, you meet other people, right? Do things you enjoy. Get out. I have said to people in the past, look, if you're feeling down, it's okay to take the day. And you tell that depression, or you tell, the sadness that's creeped up, okay, you got me. You got me today. I'm buying into you today. And sleep on the couch, watch TV, do what you need to do. But at the end of that day, the next day, okay, right? You've given yourself a chance to rest. You're not fighting it, because you fight it, it'll be worse. You get up the next day and go out for a walk. Start with something simple, right? Again, remember, if I'm telling, especially the audience that's listening, if you get out and do something, you're going to start feeling better. The more you get out, the more people you meet, even if you're an introvert. Extroverts will find you. Don't worry, they will. And try not to think I'm not worth anything because I don't have a romantic partner. That's just not true. You got to love yourself first, and that's the biggest part.
That's another one. We've got trust, we've got vulnerability, we've got loving ourselves.
Yes,
They're the hot ticket items for sure. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about just social support in general and healthy relationships. There's been a lot of studies that show that people who are in long-term relationships or married actually have better health outcomes generally, as long as it's a good relationship. If it's a bad relationship, it obviously has negative effects. So don't just stay in a marriage for health benefits. But I've seen, I've had patients who are doing that. They're staying in a relationship because whatever reason, right? There's always different reasons. I have a woman right now who came to us, her complaint is insomnia, right? And I told her initially, we talked a lot about her life, and it turns out she has trouble in her relationship. And actually, when the insomnia started was when their relationship got so bad, they decided to sleep in separate bedrooms. And from that point on, she started having insomnia. And I told her, there's no supplement, there's no pill, there's no anything I can give you to fix your marriage. Right. And you may actually need to remove yourself from this situation if he's not willing to work on it. Yeah. But I think a lot of people confuse these things. They think like, oh, just my mental health is my mental health and my other health is my other health. And again, it's all connected. So super important to look at all these different spheres and how they're connecting and making sure you're paying attention to what's going on in your relationships. Yes. But even if you're not in a relationship, like April said, social support in general is really helpful for your health also. So creating that sphere of friends or family or someone so that you're not on your own is really, really important. Do you have any tips? I know you mentioned just getting out, going on walks, meeting people, but this day and age, everyone's, working from home, virtual. Any ideas for people to meet other people, to make friends?
Yes. Well, it is hard, like what you said, being especially I wish we could all be like kids at a Chick-fil-A, right? Where you just run in and you talk to somebody and immediately you're best friends, right? Like that would be awesome. But we can't. We don't. I think it is The best thing I can say for meeting people, and this is something that I personally have had to do myself, is find what you like to do first, whether that's hiking. I have a client who loves rock climbing, and she has met so many people from going to a rock climbing gym, and just that's how she started. Um, you got to do that first, because if you love what you're doing, you're going to be a little bit more open. You're having fun, and then you'll be more open to other people and maybe going, "Hey, is this your first time too?" Oh, and you start talking. It sounds kind of selfish, but like it's not, it's self-care, right? There's a difference. And so going for yourself and doing things that you love to do is helpful. I know we're running low on time, but I do have a personal story to share. Um, Everything we're talking about really does, I can relate to everything we're talking about. Unfortunately, I was married for 20 years, and um, my ex-husband now, he's an alcoholic, unfortunately, and he was sober for a long period of time. He got back into drinking, ended up having an affair, and had chosen this partner instead of staying in the marriage. And so 20 years with someone, like, I felt like my world blew up. And I became that isolated person. I became very depressed. If it wasn't for my social support, I have thankfully throughout the last 10 years or so, through church, through work. I met some people through work. I have this group of girls, these women that are very empowering. They are they are validating, and they literally, each one of them picked me up and said, "Enough is enough. We love you. He has done what he has done, and he will deal with that, but you have kids and you are valuable." And so having that social support, and to this day, they're still there. I saw my friend yesterday that we talked about that is now coming into a healthy relationship. I talk to these women all the time. And these women, one of them is a therapist herself. So that's kind of handy. Uh, but that social support saved me. It really did. My kids and my social support. And now I love talking to other people about, you're getting a divorce. It's okay. Don't take the shame that, oh my gosh, I failed. If there's a marriage that is a good marriage, I love love. I love marriage. I think marriage is wonderful. I think you can do it. But if you're struggling, hey, you know what? I'm going to support this, and we're going to make it the best marriage you've ever had. But if it wasn't for those people, I don't know where I'd be. So social support is huge. They have got me doing all sorts of fun things that I never thought. I started my own practice. I never thought I would do that, right? And it's because of their belief in me. So it's important, very important.
So amazing. Well, I'm so glad that you could join us today, and thank you
Yes, it
for
was
being
fun.
vulnerable as well. Because again, I know so many people relate to the stories you've shared today, and you shared a lot of good tips and tricks too. So everyone who's listening, start putting these things into action. Really, really
Yes.
important. But if someone wants to reach out to you or follow your work, learn more, how should they do that?
Yes. Well, actually, like I just said, I started a practice, and I'm still, the website is under construction. So I am legit. Of course, anybody in Florida. Now I'm licensed in Florida, so I can only help do therapy for people in Florida. But if you are interested, I'd be happy to reach out to other states and help you find help. I am on Psychology Today, so you can find me that way. And I also, you can reach out at April at positiveblooms.com. Is a great place to email me at. And I also have an office number that is only goes to me. People can text me too, and that's at 904-515-3210. So stay tuned, because I'm getting an Instagram account. I'm getting a website. I'm about to blow it up big, girl. So I'm excited.
Yeah, super exciting for April, but also all the people that are going to learn from you and have that support, and someone with a listening ear that they can trust. That's
Absolutely.
really, really huge. So I thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge today, and hopefully we can have you back for a later episode.
I would love that anytime.
Yes. In the meantime, everyone, keep thriving, and we'll be back next week for more holistic health tips. So stay tuned.